There's a kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels dangerous, like something is watching, waiting, coiled beneath the surface, not the silence of peace. The silence after betrayal, after you've cried, screamed, begged, and realized none of it mattered. That's when it hits you. Not all wounds bleed, some just echo, quietly, permanently. He didn't leave because he was weak. She didn't stop talking because she gave up. They chose silence, because nothing screams louder than absence. We live in a world addicted to noise, words, opinions, outrage. Everyone wants the last word. But the real power, it belongs to the one who walks away and says nothing. You see, silence doesn't mean there's nothing left to say. It means there's nothing worth saying anymore. Imagine this. You're betrayed by the people you trusted. Not with weapons, but with twisted truths. Not with fists, but with gaslighting, with smiles hiding knives. They distort your reality, question your sanity, make you doubt your worth. And just when they expect a reaction, a meltdown, a scream, a breakdown, you offer them nothing, just silence. And that silence destroys them. Because in that moment, you become unpredictable, untouchable, uncontrollable. Revenge is what they expect, but you don't give them that satisfaction. You become the silence they can't unhear, the quiet they fear more than your words, the absence that rots in their mind. And maybe that's why so many people are disappearing into silence today. Not because they're broken, but because they're done explaining, done defending.
Done participating in a game rigged from the start. It's not cowardice, it's clarity. They've seen behind the curtain, heard the lies behind every smile, felt the weight of truth crush every illusion. So they walk away, without revenge, without
words. Just a silence that screams louder than any war cry ever could. And maybe that's what scares this world the most. Not the rebels who scream, but the thinkers who say nothing, the ones who vanish, not to hide, but to become something greater. So ask yourself, what if silence was never about weakness? What if it was a weapon, a mirror, a warning? Because some silences don't end. They echo through time, through memory, through guilt. And the ones who caused it, they never forget the sound of a silence that screams. Empires don't fall with a single blow. They crumble quietly, not with revolutions sparked by guns or bombs, but by whispers in the streets, silent stares in the market, empty chairs where loyal subjects once sat. History remembers kings, tyrants, and emperors, but it forgets the silence that surrounded them right before everything fell apart. Take Rome, not the gladiator version Hollywood loves, but the bloated, corrupted Rome, rotting from the inside. For centuries, the Roman Empire ruled the world through blood, fear, and spectacle. Bread and circuses kept the people entertained, distracted. And while they cheered in the Colosseum, their freedom was quietly stolen. But then came the silence. Farmers stopped showing up to vote. Citizens stopped enrolling in the military. Even the Senate, once loud with debates, grew quiet, passive, indifferent. The empire didn't fall because of one war. It fell because the people stopped believing in it. They didn't scream. They just checked out. And what's more terrifying than an empire ignored? Look at the fall of the Soviet Union. Decades of tight control, surveillance, propaganda, crushing.
Dissent before it ever reached the streets. But in the end,
it wasn't war that brought it down. It was internal decay, mass disillusionment, a quiet turning away. Factory workers showed up late, or not at all. Intellectuals stopped writing for the state. Even spies stopped spying with conviction. People weren't shouting in the streets. They were withdrawing, pulling their spirit out of the machine. And when the machine lost its fuel, it didn't explode.
It simply stopped. That's what silence does. It unplugs power at the source, because power is nothing without belief, without participation, without compliance. Silence, true silence, is rebellion in its purest form. A silent refusal to play.
The game. And maybe that's why tyrants have always feared the quiet ones. The monk who burned himself in Vietnam didn't say a word, but his silence echoed across the world. The Jews in Nazi Germany who chose to hide families, smuggle letters, risk everything, they weren't shouting in crowds. They were whispering in attics, choosing silence over surrender. Even Gandhi, often portrayed as peaceful, understood silence not as passivity, but strategy. His civil disobedience, a national refusal to cooperate, a mass decision to simply not engage with oppression. No war, no bloodshed, just the power of a country quietly stepping back until the colonizers had no one left to rule. That's the real threat to any system built on control. When the people stopped arguing, stopped reacting, stop obeying, because silence forces reflection, and reflection leads to realization, and realization, that's revolution. You see, the world isn't changed by loud men with microphones. It's changed by silent people with nothing left to lose, and everything left to feel. And in every era, there comes a moment, a terrifying moment, when silence becomes collective, when millions stop believing, when they unplug from the system, not to destroy it, but to leave it behind, and the empire, once drunk on its own voice, finally hears the one sound it was never prepared for. Silence, not the silence of peace, but the silence of departure. A ghost town of minds, a generation saying, we're done pretending. That's how things fall, not with a bang, but with a whisper that builds until it's deafening. So the next time you hear nothing, no headlines, no protests, no outrage, don't relax. Worry, because when people are screaming, they still believe change is possible. But when they go quiet, it means they're building something else, somewhere else, without you. And that's when the empire dies. Not by force, but by abandonment, by the chilling power of a silence that no army, no law, no dictator can ever truly silence. Trust is invisible until it's gone. You can't touch it, can't measure it, but it's what holds reality together. Not governments, not money, not love, trust. The belief that what you're seeing is real, that the people around you mean what they say, that the world is safe enough to participate in. But what happens when that belief breaks? What happens when your mind, without your permission, decides it's no longer safe to trust? Detachment isn't a decision, it's a defense. It begins slowly. You start noticing the cracks in conversations, in institutions, in your own reflection. You hear someone say, I'm fine, but their eyes betray them. You watch the news, but your gut says something's off. You see the world smiling, selling, spinning, and you feel nothing. Your brain begins to whisper, don't fall for it again. Don't get hurt again. Don't speak. They'll just twist your words. And so you start stepping back, not out of bitterness, but for survival. The psychologist Carl Jung once wrote, the greatest tragedy of the family is the unlived lives of the parents. But what about the unlived lives of the children, the ones who learned too early that connection was a trap, that being seen meant being exploited? That love came with conditions. Detachment doesn't scream. It fades. It looks like scrolling through life without reacting, like smiling at a joke you don't find funny, like answering, I'm okay, when your soul is unraveling. It's a shutdown. A quiet turning in. The mind builds walls, not to keep people out, but to keep the self intact, untouchable, unseen. Because once you've been lied to long enough, you stop asking questions. Once you've been disappointed enough times, you stop expecting anything at all. And that's when silence becomes second nature. You stop arguing, you stop explaining, you stop hoping, you become safe, but numb. And society loves that version of you because detached people don't rebel. They don't fight, they comply, they smile, nod, perform, and die quietly inside. But deep down, a storm is building because detachment isn't peace. It's the mind's emergency brake. It's what happens when the soul can no longer afford to trust the world it's in. And here's the part no one talks about. The detached ones. They see everything. They notice the hypocrisy. They hear what others ignore. They read the room like a crime scene. Because when you can no longer rely on comfort, you develop a sixth sense for danger. You become a master of pattern recognition, a forensic analyst of emotion, a silent observer of human deceit. And so the question becomes, if they see so much, why don't they speak? Simple. Because they've learned the cost of truth. They've watched people weaponize vulnerability. They've been gaslit into silence. They've seen their honesty used as leverage against them. So now they speak in riddles, or not at all. Because silence is safer, cleaner, untraceable. It can't be twisted, it can't be quoted. It just exists, like a shadow that follows the trauma. And yet within that silence, there's wisdom. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once wrote, "The tyrant dies, and his rule ends. The martyr dies, and his rule begins." But what of the silent martyr, the one who doesn't die, but disappears? Their power doesn't end or begin, it simmers. In the spaces between trust and trauma, detachment becomes a laboratory, a place where the self is deconstructed, re-examined, reassembled. The detached are not broken, they are in transition. They are figuring out how to live in a world that punished them for being awake. So if you find yourself pulling back, if you feel like you're watching life through a glass wall, don't panic. You're not lost. You're awakening. You've seen too much, felt too much, trusted too deeply, and paid the price. And now you are learning something more powerful than revenge, detachment. Not the kind that turns cold, but the kind that sees clearly, that stops expecting, stops needing, and finally stops bleeding. Because silence is not always an ending. Sometimes it's a beginning, a quiet return to the self, before the betrayal, before the illusions, before the mask. And in that silence, you don't disappear. You reclaim your time, your thoughts, your reality. Because when the mind stops trusting the world, it starts trusting itself. And from that, a different kind of power is born. Not loud, not violent, just steady and unshakable. The world is loud, but not in the way we think. It's not just the roar of voices, the cacophony of opinion, the constant barrage of media, noise and distractions. No, it's something far more dangerous, far more quiet. Silence. It was in silence that the oppressed gave the most profound message to the oppressors. You don't need to hear me to know I'm no longer yours. And that silence is just as powerful today. But why silence? Why not just scream? Why not shout your frustration to the world? The answer lies in the psyche. You see, when we are hurt, when we are betrayed, when we are humiliated, we react in one of two ways. We either lash out, we scream, we fight to be heard, or we detach. We detach not because we're weak, but because we've reached the point where we see the futility in reacting. We detach because we understand that not all battles are worth fighting. Not all wars can be won through force. In psychology, this detachment is known as a defense mechanism. It's a way of protecting ourselves from the overwhelming weight of external forces. It's not submission, it's survival. It's the quiet withdrawal of someone who's seen the manipulation, who's witnessed the control, and who understands that no amount of noise will change the inevitable. It's the silence of the mind, choosing to stop trusting. And in that silence, the mind begins to heal, to process, to regain control. It's the silence of someone who knows that sometimes stepping away is the only way to win. This is only the beginning, because what history buried, silence remembers. And in that silence, the seeds of something far more powerful begin to grow.